Hello and welcome. I'm Marc Seal, and this is the Ultimate Guitar Show. We've got a great show for you today. Finally, learning power chords. That's what we're going to do on this show, and also part 2 on the next show. During our sound advice, I'm going to give you guys a great distortion sound to use to practice your power chords. For Riff of the Week, we're going to learn a nice little power chord progression so you can really get the power chords under your fingers quickly and effectively. And our special guest, we have a ridiculous guitar player, Mr. Mike Keneally, will be joining us a little bit later on to play a song for you and answer some questions. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. So sit back and enjoy the Ultimate Guitar Show. It starts now. All about technique. Today we're going to discuss power chords, which is pretty much the most played chord on a guitar, especially in rock and roll. Now what's neat about power chords is it's one shape that you can move all over the fingerboard and basically write songs with using just power chords. A lot of bands have done that and made their living off of it, from the punk bands of the 70s through a lot of the glam metal bands in the 80s, right up to current day bands like Green Day and Blink-182, NoFX. They've pretty much made their living off the power chord. Let me show you an example of what it looks like. Now the main thing you probably noticed right there was that I was basically holding the same chord shape and just moving it around. Well, power chords are neither major nor minor, so they're kind of a neutral chord and they can be played anywhere on the fingerboard. Let me show you a common standard voicing of a power chord. First finger, 5th fret 6th string, 3rd finger 7th fret 5th string, and you only hit the 2 strings that your fingers are on. You basically want to try to leave your first finger a little more flat on the back of the neck to keep the other strings quiet, but really with your pick you try to only hit those 2 strings. Now what's neat is that this shape stays true all over the fingerboard. For example, my first finger is always on the bigger of the 2 strings, but they're always on 2 strings next to each other, and they're always 2 frets apart. So I can take that shape and move it around. I can move it to the 5th string, down to the 4th. I can't go to the 3rd string though, the pattern doesn't hold true, but I can pick it back up on the 2nd string. So it's, and then also moving it horizontally across the fingerboard. You can move it all over the place just like that. Now a couple different voicings for the power chord as you're looking at slide 1 is you'll see the first one we did, 1 and 3. But also we can do our first finger on the 5th fret 6th string, 3rd finger 7th fret 5th, and 4th finger on the 7th fret 4th. And all we're adding is the higher octave of that starting note. So those 2 are the same notes, just 1 octave apart, and it makes it a little bit fatter power chord. But the main power chord I want you to practice is the next one, and that's where we're going to use our first finger on the 5th fret and our pinky on the 7th fret of the 5th string. Now traditional guitar players and traditional teaching has always taught use fingers 1 and 3 because they're 1 finger per fret, that mentality that we've kind of put out there on the other shows. But there's one exception, I think. By using your pinky for your power chords, I think you're going to get a lot of benefit out of it. And the benefits kind of outweigh the negatives. And what I mean by that is our pinky is kind of underused as it is. And power chords are used a lot. So if you're using your pinky for your power chords, you're going to end up using your pinky a lot more, which is going to strengthen it and get the callus better and more coordination with it. So that's really helpful. On top of that, if you want to do bigger stretches ever, you have more room to do so with your pinky. You can stretch a little wider. And lastly, when you're doing the rock thing, your guitar will be a lot lower. Typically if you're rocking out on stage, you got your guitar down around your knees and everything's going crazy. Well, what happens if you're using your 3rd finger for your power chords, you put a lot of pressure on your tendons and your wrists up here by having the guitar low. You can see how bent my wrist is. But by using your pinky, you can flatten your hand a lot more. It's a lot less wear on your wrist, and you'll be able to play a lot longer without any damage. So I think the pinky is a really good way to go. So let me show you a little progression that you can use to practice this. We're going to start with our first finger on the 7th fret 6th string and make a power chord. Now all we have to know to make a power chord really is that if our first finger, wherever it's at, our pinky is going to go over 2 frets and 1 string higher. So if my first finger is on the 7th fret of the 6th string, my pinky is going to go 2 frets up to the 9th fret and up 1 string to the 5th string. And you'll notice on slide number 2, let's call that up, You're going to see that we're going to do this 8 times. And the way you count 8 is going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Those are called eighth notes. So we'll make our power chord shape, and we're going to hit those 2 strings with downstrokes 8 times, internally or externally counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Sounds like this. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now if you look at the next section on the slide, it does the same chord starting on the 5th fret. So now we go to 5 and 7, and the little percent sign above the chord simply states play the same rhythm that you played in the previous section. So in this case we're going to do eighth notes again on that section. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Down to the 3rd fret, you'll notice that the 3rd fret on the 6th string is where we start the next power chord, so it just moves down 2 more frets. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Back up to the 5th fret. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if you can play that consistently while changing chords, that's going to be the real goal here, is to play it smooth. You don't want to play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and stop, change chords, 1 and 2. That's not going to work. What you've got to do is be able to connect it, keep your right hand moving even when you're changing the chords. This is going to become more like a motor, kind of like an afterthought. So check it out. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So if you notice, my right hand will not stop. Watch this. Even if I make a mistake, my right hand keeps going, similar to just a motor, if you will, is the only way I can think of it. To recap everything we just did, what I would have you do is learn the power chord shape, practice moving it around the fingerboard, all downstrokes, using eighth notes and counting eighth notes, and try to play it really clean without stopping. And that'll be probably a really good exercise for you to get power chords under your belt, and in future shows we'll definitely get more in depth with them. Riff of the week. I'm going to apply a little riff for you guys that's all power chords so you can get the practicing down on your power chords. And here's what the riff sounds like. So there's the riff, and it was all power chords. Let's go ahead and call up slide number 3, and let's take a look at what I played. I started with my first finger on the 7th fret and made a power chord. Now typically what I would say to myself when I'm looking at tablature like this is I'd say, okay, where's the lowest note on there? And that's the 7 on the 5th string. And as long as I know that my first finger is always that lowest note, then I know that I can make a power chord by simply taking my pinky, moving it over 2 frets into the next string higher. And that, in this case, would be the 9th fret of the 4th string. Also notice that above each one of the chords I've written in slide 3, there's an arc with an 8 over the top. And the 8 simply means you're going to be playing eighth notes with the power chord. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and for each one. But what you're probably already saying to yourself is you're seeing the last 2 slides only have a 4 over them. The last 2 sections only have a 4. And that's because we're going to split a measure and play half the measure one chord, half the next. And we'll cover that in just a minute when we get there. But let's go ahead and play the first section. So first finger, 7th fret, 5th string, doing eighth notes. So you're going to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Sounds like this. Remember to try to only hit those 2 strings that you're playing, and also try to use your first finger here. If you can get a close-up, you'll see my first finger here is slightly touching the 6th string. And what that's going to be helpful for is to keep that 6th string quiet in case you accidentally hit it with the pick. If you leave it open, then it's going to ring. So you might want to try to use your first finger just up a little bit to always barely touch the string above it to make sure it mutes out. So you can hear if I hit the string, it's just clicking. Okay, one more time, counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The next chord is first finger 5th fret on the 5th string, so we simply slide over 2 frets, keep the same power chord shape, again count eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Next chord down to the 3rd fret, again eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now here's where we get that last measure where we're going to split the bar. What you're going to do is you're going to play the 2nd fret power chord, so first finger, 2nd fret, 5th string with a power chord, and we're going to count 1 and 2 and then we move up to the 5th fret and count 3 and 4 and, so that completes the full measure. Looks and sounds like this, starting on the 2nd fret, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we take it back up and repeat. Notice the two little dots at the beginning of the slide there and the two dots at the end. That's always a repeat sign, so remember that. And basically what you want to do is loop this at a decent tempo without stopping when you're changing chords. A good rule of thumb is to try to play these things as fast as you can without making mistakes and without stopping between chords, and that way you'll get a lot of practice in. Always hitting just the two strings you're supposed to be hitting and keeping your first finger back a little bit to try to mute out the higher strings. The whole progression at a slow tempo will sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and... All right, let's go ahead and call up slide number 4. This is the second half of that same progression. Sounds like this. We're going to start with our first finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and we're going to hit the 1st string open, which actually, let me show you this. This is an open power chord, but let me show you why it works. If I'm doing a power chord, say on the first fret of the 6th string, it would look like this, right? 2 frets apart, 1 string apart, 1st finger on the lower string. Well, if you notice, if I were to walk down 1 more fret, I would have 0 and 2. So it's still the same shape. People get confused because it doesn't look the same because you're only using 1 finger, but it's still just an open power chord. For this last slide here, on slide 4, what we're going to do is have it apply 2 open power chords, one off the E and then one off the open A string. Sounds like this. And then again, you would repeat that over and over again. So let's take a look at it. First finger, 2nd fret, 5th string. We're going to hit that chord 8 times, just those 2 strings. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. First finger, 3rd fret, 6th string. Make a power chord. Again, 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. First finger, 2nd fret, 4th string. 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And last chord, first finger, 3rd fret, 5th string. Again, 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That one's going to be a little more challenging than slide 3, but you'll kind of progress to that and you'll get comfortable with it. Now, as always with the power chords, what I want you to do is find your own ways to play them. Just like all the variables we've done with everything else, make up your own licks. Play power chords wherever you want. I don't care if you start on the 12th fret of the 5th string and chromatically go down to an open one. That's great. That's good practice. Or changing strings vertically. You know, you can make up any kind of patterns you want, but I think what you're going to find at the end of the day, there's a million songs that you'll use power chords for, and you'll find great riffs that you can write with them. Sounds like this, the whole progression. I'm going to do slide number 3, repeated twice, to slide number 4, repeated twice. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound advice. One of the most important parts about playing guitar is getting a good sound, so I'm here to show you how to do that. If you start by having a clean channel on your amp, meaning no effects, no distortion, what you want to do is you want to EQ it from the ground up, starting with your bass. So what I like to do is I'll hit my bass string, and I'll turn the bass up on the amp, or the low notes, till I get to a place that's comfortable. That has plenty of bass, and then I'll work my way up to the highs by going to the mids next. You notice it starts to clear up a little bit. And then I'll top it off with a little bit of high end, the treble, to make sure it's real crystal. That way you get a really nice, clean sound that's well balanced, has plenty of lows, plenty of mids, plenty of highs, but it's not that ear-piercing sound that a lot of guitar players tend to get. And that usually happens because everybody starts by diming everything. And by dime, I mean go to 10 on everything. They'll have their treble at 10, their mids at 10, their bass at 10, and there's really nowhere to go from there. So basically, if you start from the ground up, low notes first, I think you'll get a great clean tone. And then next we want to add our distortion to that. We kind of want to approach distortion the same way. We start by turning our distortion pedal on, and it doesn't matter which one you have, but make sure that the distortion control is all the way down, and you're going to work that into the mix to see what it sounds like. I'm going to turn my pedal on here, and I'm going to slowly bring the distortion up. And you'll notice I got to about maybe 3/4 of the way up, and that gave me a really nice warm distortion. So now I've got a great clean sound when I turn the distortion pedal off, and a nice distortion sound when I turn it on. Lastly, you want to make sure that the volume levels are the same. And the way to do that is to basically hit a chord or hit a string and turn the pedal on and off as you do it, like this. Now I have mine set pretty equal right there. If the distortion's too loud, obviously on the pedal, turn it down. If it's not loud enough, then you bump it up. But you make it so they're pretty well equal, so that as you're playing, it blends real nice from one setting to the other. Our guest today is going to blow your mind. The first time I had the opportunity to see him was at the G3 concert, the first one, with Steve Vai at the Hollywood Bowl. And guitar parts that I can play if I really concentrate. He was running around the stage, kicking his feet around and doing the whole trip. Just effortlessly. You're about to see some of the sickest guitar playing you've ever seen, and I mean that in a good way. Mr. Mike Keneally, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Tear it up for these guys, all right?
All right, you got it.
All right. Dude, that was unbelievable. I love what you just played. That was killer.
Thanks, man.
You know what I noticed? You were doing a lot of tap dancing when you were doing that? All the pedals up here?
My training is mostly in dance.
So guitar's your second thing, next to tap. You know, could you show all the viewers what you got going on down here, how you're getting those sounds?
Yeah, glad to.
Right,
I'm running 2 amps simultaneously. First of all, it all stems from the beautiful Taylor T5, and then from there I'm going into this the splitter, and that's sending one signal direct to this acoustic amp, California Blonde, which is the acoustic sound you're hearing. And then in addition to that, I've got a volume pedal which is controlling the electric side, the Rivera, which maybe better if you could hear it. So you've got electric and acoustic happening, and then with the Rivera foot switch, I can add a little more gain to the electric lead channel. And then if I wanted to be completely ridiculous, I add even more distortion and gain with this T-Rex distortion pedal. And then I've got a wah-wah in addition to that, because just the sound of distorted wah-wah guitar and clean acoustic guitar in tandem is just not something I hear enough of, you know. And then I have a tuner, because I keep bending the strings really high.
Now, is the wah pedal, is that actually affecting your acoustic tone as well?
It's not. It's always a completely unaffected acoustic tone, no matter what sort of insanity is happening on the electric side. I like having that as sort of a constant, sort of a comforting thing, so that on the electric end I can be as demented as I need to be.
It's perfect, man. It sounds killer. Really nice stuff.
Cool. Thank you, man.
So I understand you have a new album out, Guitar Therapy Live.
Guitar Therapy Live is the first live album I've put out in about 10 years, and it documents my most recent band, which is a quartet, featuring a bunch of old friends of mine. We've been playing together in various forms for a long time, but this was the first time we ever went out on the road. So this was the documentation of the first time these particular 4 guys ever went out and kind of tore it up, and we had a really good time. It was a good tour.
Is there a DVD to follow?
There's a DVD, actually. If you go and order Guitar Therapy Live from Keneally.com, then you can order a special edition, which is a signed, numbered, limited edition that contains a DVD of an entire show that we did at the Baked Potato in North Hollywood last year. So that's a 2.5-hour concert on video, in addition to the live album, which is about 74 minutes or something. So it's a lot of bang for your buck, hopefully.
Yeah, right on, man. I'm sure it is. On the new album, now the lesson I have done today on the show is all about power chords. Did you use any power chords on your album at all?
Let me think.
So do you have any
There's
demonstrations you can give us on that?
Well, there's my version of a power chord, which is sort of has a lot of open strings in it.
What's cool is I noticed you're doing the power chord shapes, and a lot of those, the 2-fret thing. But with the open notes, it's kind of interesting because you get a lot of the dissonant tones, but you're still doing the same basic power chord shape.
Yeah, because you could be going, those standard power chord things. But then if you decide to go, you're playing avant-garde music, and you can get a grant from a local university.
There you go. Perfect. Well, one thing I want to point out, for those of viewers who are watching at home, he was a part of the Zappa legacy, if you will. And how many years were you with Zappa?
Just about a year. We did a few months of rehearsal, and then we went out and did about a 4-month world tour. Yeah. And we rehearsed longer than we gigged.
Well, it seems like you're pretty heavily influenced, though, from that whole era. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, very. I first started listening to Frank when I was 9, so I was twisted into that shape at a very early age.
And were you playing guitar at 9, 10 years old? Or
first instrument was keyboard. I started playing electric organ when I was 7, and then when I was 11, I asked for a guitar for my birthday, and I got it because I'd been loving the Beatles for so long, and I wanted to play a guitar. Yeah. There's just something magic about a guitar, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. My 11th birthday, that's when I got mine.
There you go.
So same thing, yeah.
Right on.
So very cool. And I think that's really about it. Thanks for coming out, man. I really appreciate it. Definitely a cool hang, and you're just a ridiculous player, so I really do appreciate you coming out.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right.